All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on retirement income planning. My name is Tim Kehrer. I'm with Kehrer Bielan. We're gonna sort of move slowly here for the first couple of minutes as we allow folks to sign on. While I'm doing that, I'll let you know the ways that you in the audience today can join our discussion. One is by using the raise your hand function. That's a button that you can find on your screen. If you have a question or a comment for the group over the course of today's event, you can click on that button. I'll get a notification and it'll allow me to actually beam you onto the screen. You can join us just via audio or audio and video if you're set up to do that. Another way to send us your questions and comments is through the chat function. That's also a button on your screen. All of us that you'll be able to see on your screen today will be able to see those chats. We'll do our best to get to your questions as we move through today's event. Once again, my name's Tim Kehrer. I'm with Kehrer Bielan Research and Consulting. We're pleased to be hosting today's event. We wouldn't be able to do that without the support of our sponsors. The sponsors for today are Producers Choice Network and Capital Rock. Thanks to you both. At the top of these things, I usually kick it off by, describing how as a lot of things have been in the last year, our webinars, right, are a substitute for something that we used to do face-to-face. Ken pioneered the model of bringing together peers in a study group format to share their experiences and to learn from one another. And we do our best in this virtual setting to recreate the kind of idea sharing and back and forth that were the hallmark of our in-person study groups. The model we found kind of seems to work the best is we've picked a few folks that are going to be on your screen today. I've got them listed on the screen here, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But we find that these events work the best when you and the audience can get involved and we're able to hear your voice as well as all of these excellent folks. As I mentioned before, you've got a couple of ways to do that. You can click the raise your hand button, which will allow you to join us on the screen or to just talk to us over audio if that's your preference. You can also use the chat function. That's also a button on your screen. All of us today that you can see on your screen will be able to see those chats, and we will try to get to your questions and comments as best we can. Joining us on your screen today is Larry Cohen, the director of the Consumer Financial Decisions Macro Monitor Survey, Jamie Kosherek from Producers Choice, Jeff Henley from the Advanced Planning Education Group, Britt Cross from DA Davidson, and Connor Thomas from Capital Rock. Thanks all of you for joining. We've got a few other members of the Kehrer Bielan team joining us on your screen today as well. Our principals, Ken Kehrer and Peter Bielan, as well as Steve Lipker, one of the newest members of our team. I'm going to go ahead and actually, I guess Ken, you had a slide that you were going to go over first. So before I stop sharing, which I like to do, again in the interest of sort of keeping the flow of conversation going. But first, I'm going to kick it over to Ken, who's going to go over what we're going to cover today. Ken.
Thanks, Tim, and welcome everybody. As our clients shift from accumulating assets for retirement to spending down those assets. What do we know about the differences that causes in what they want, what they need, what they care about, and how they want to access advice? What does consumer research tell us about these things? The new realities of retirement. What are retirees' greatest concerns? Who do they trust for advice? And what about their financial confidence? Are our advisors prepared to serve the retired, since we've been mostly serving the pre-retired? And how can advisors be compensated for this much more complex advice? We've got a great group to kick off that discussion. And I'm particularly pleased to be joined by Larry Cohen today. We've enjoyed a great partnership with Larry and his firm, SBI. And through that partnership, we've been able to bring the value of the Macro Monitor survey to our clients. As many of you know, we consider the Macro Monitor to be the gold standard of consumer financial databases. We've asked Larry to share some data on what we call retirement investors. Who are they? Well, retirement investors are the people you want to be your clients. They're families who have passed the years of saving for education or saving to buy a house, and their main focus now is on saving and investing for retirement. And some of them aren't retired yet, and others are. Most research that you see doesn't focus on these people who are your clients. Oh, well, there's another important thing about that. They have some savings. They have at least $100,000 in financial assets. As you know, many of your colleagues out there in other firms have said, we prefer not to serve clients that don't have at least 100,000. So that's why we focus on this group. People who are saving and investing for retirement, or are already retired, but have at least 100,000. Larry, I did a little calculations this morning from the data you shared us, and last year we actually crossed the tipping point. In terms of these retirement investors, there are now more of them that are retired than are pre-retired. What else do we know about these people? Are you muted?
No, I not anymore. we know quite a lot about them from the Macro Monitor because we've been following them for almost 4 decades. And 2 decades ago, around 2002, we started to change the way we divided consumers into separate subsegments. We were anticipating that the age 65 in which everyone retired was going to fade as a crisp demarcation between people being retired and not being retired. And so we started to develop some questions that would take a look at, from the consumer's own point of view, do they consider themselves to be retired? And then are they behaving in ways that are commensurate with that? I think I'm going to share my screen and hopefully, there we go, be able to get into some data here. How's that? Everybody can see the title page?
Yep.
Good. So one of the first things we did was to create this segmentation that looked at different populations. The pre-retired would be any household where the primary head was over 45, but no longer do they have any dependent children in the household, and they are not yet retired. So this could go all the way up to, I don't know, age 85 or so. But the important thing is that as a group, they're cohesive in that they do not have dependent children and they are not retired. Our younger retired are defined by saying, yes, we're retired, but we have not yet crossed the line into RMD. We are in a period in which we have yet to have required minimum distributions. And then the older retired households were those in which they are retired and in fact have crossed the line into being in a place where they have to take the money out, whether they want to or not. And as you can see from this chart, we've also divided out those who have $100,000 to $250,000 in financial assets, or if they have over $250,000 in financial assets. And what's interesting to note is, as you'd expect in that pre-retired group, the vast majority of them are not retired, but are in a period in which they are preparing for retirement. Now, back in 2002, we anticipated what we later named as a segment of the population who would kind of straddle between pre-retired and not yet fully retired, what we called the revolving retired. And it's been a fascinating group to follow over the course of the years. They've grown consistently over the last 2 decades. And events like recessions, like in 2008, 9, and recently what happened with COVID-19, these have a tremendous effect on the proportion of the population, whether or not they are moving into retirement or moving back into the workforce. As you can see here, among these populations, roughly over half of them are focused on retirement and preparing for it. You have roughly a fifth of them are in this revolving retirement group, and another fifth who are in the not retired, not preparing. Even among households that have significant assets, you can see there's a large proportion of them who are not even thinking about retirement yet. When we look at the next set of households, those who in fact are in that younger retired group, overwhelmingly, you can see their involvement with being retired and not preparing. But you still see roughly 10%, 15% of them who are in this revolving retirement group. And this data is from 2020. We collected it during August and September. So it was far enough along into the pandemic that people realized it wasn't going to be a weekend thing. And yet it was still way before the peak that occurred in terms of last winter. So you can see the transition from 2018 to 2020. We saw a lot of people moving into retirement, but we also saw a lot of people moving from retirement into a more revolving retire because they were interested in guaranteeing income. They were worried about their situation and didn't know what their situation would be in the future. So very interesting changes. When we look at the older retirees who are 90% or so retired, you can still see among this group some roughly 10%, even among those with some money, that are in this revolving retired life stage. And I think that's important to keep in mind. For many people who have the resources, and with the resources, hopefully the health, there are a lot of people who continue to become active and involved in doing things. And they may make some money, they may do it on a voluntary basis, but the point is that's their choice. They have the resources, but they're choosing to do that. So that's a lot about how retirement has been changed. We also asked some questions about where the focus was for these same households. And looking at first health issues, what's interesting to note is it tends to go up a little bit as we get into the later life stages. And it also tends to be slightly lower among the wealthier households. I mean, one of the things is that you can't buy happiness, but you certainly can pay a down payment on your health. And indeed, some of these households are doing just that. When it comes to putting one's affairs in order, I was fascinated. This comes out as roughly a quarter of the population, and it doesn't seem to differ that much depending on whether they're pre-retired, younger retired, or older retired. It almost is as if there's a theme throughout one's later life stages of trying to get my life together, figuring out how to put it in order. It's not just preparing for death or for those who come after you. Now, the other thing that a lot of people are concerned about is living on a fixed income. And except for the very wealthiest, you can see that these numbers are roughly up there with concerns about health issues. It doesn't matter if you have $100,000 to $250,000, they're just as likely to say they're concerned about living on a fixed income. It's only when you get to the households that have over $250,000 does that proportion go down, particularly among people who are actually in retirement. So having once experienced it, some of the anxiety about going into retirement is dealt with. The reality of being in retirement makes them a little more confident about whether or not they'll have adequate money. Managing one's assets correlates directly with the people who have $250,000 or more. It's higher among that segment, regardless of whether it's pre-retired, younger retired, or older retired. And estate planning is also interesting in that there is a small portion of people who are concerned about it in the pre-retired, but once you get into the retirement, it's the wealthy who are much more concerned about it. And even when you shift from the younger retired, in which the wealthiest group is roughly 20% concerned, all of those who are in the older retired, or at least 20% of them, are concerned about estate planning. And it's closer to a third of the ones who have $250,000. Trust is another issue that we've been measuring since, well, actually 1994. But what I'm going to show you here is just among the pre-retired. Now think about this. It was last August and September. There was uncertainty all over the place. We had heard there's a huge recession, but at the same time, the stock market was doing so well that you would think people who are retired are in fact more secure than they would have been otherwise. This entire chart looks just at the pre-retired, and we're going to look at 3 time frames: 2002, 2018, before the pandemic, 2020, the most recent measurement. When it comes to trusting an institution a great deal, and this one is on full service brokerages, you can see that roughly 10% in 2002, slightly fewer 2018, and going back to about 10% in 2020. Now, I should mention that when we measure this question of trust, we don't use a 10-point scale. We use a 3-point scale because it's easy for people to understand. You either trust people a lot, some, or hardly at all. And that way, instead of having to combine 6s and 7s to be some or whatever, we feel confident that the measurement we're getting is accurate when it comes to people's reflections. So these are just the ones who are saying they trust these types of institutions a great deal. And the pattern here of it was higher in 2002, it was lower in 2018, and then it's recovered a little in 2021 is one of our big findings. Because it's true not only among the full service firms and among those with 100,000 to 250, but even the ones that are in the 250 plus. It's fascinating to me, this group in the middle, the 100,000 to 250,000, are really different, not only here in trust, but in other areas as well. They may not have been able to take advantage as the wealthiest populations have in terms of the stock market. And so some of their levels of trust have not actually improved in spite of the situation. They may in fact have greater concerns when it comes to living on a fixed income and health issues and other things like that. And I think if you're going to target this group, it's a different type of an approach than if you're targeting the wealthier populations. Here we see the same numbers when it comes to a mutual fund company. And again, that middle group, the number is down, if you will, between 18 and 20. Financial planning company runs in the other direction. Generally speaking, over the course of the same 2 decades, the level of trust overall among the pre-retired slightly went up. In that group you're concerned about, the 100 to 250, definitely up. But in the group who are the wealthiest, it actually had gone down and now more than recovered. And when it comes to the banks, first thing you've got to notice is overall, just the quantity of people who say they trust a bank a great deal, significantly higher than a full service brokerage, a mutual fund company, financial planning company. This is true among the pre-retired overall. It's also true among those who have 100,000 to 250,000. And it's certainly also true among those with $250,000 or more. The other thing to notice is the recovery in terms of trust right here in that group from 2018 to 2020 in the wealthiest group. They are trusting their banks more a great deal. Now, I also have measurements in here that I look at other types of institutions. I've not shown them because I wanted to compare financial companies, particularly to banks. It turns out that credit unions are trusted even more, but not necessarily when it comes to issues involving investments. And the other overall finding, and this is something of an anomaly. I mean, after 2 decades in which trusts in financial institutions have basically gradually drifted downward, we're seeing a recovery right in the middle of a recession. So the same chart, though, talking about just the younger retired. Now, younger retirees, because they are in fact retired, reflect people who have the wherewithal to be able to actually retire. Or in many cases in the course of a recession, people have been re-engineered out of their current employment and sort of forced to retire because they were no longer wanted at the companies they were at. And I don't know if you've seen the numbers, but there was it was a Pew poll done recently that showed about half of all households in the ages of the 50s, you have primary heads of household who have lost their jobs. This is significantly higher than any time in recent memory. And it reflects the fact that today you can almost expect a major transition occurring in a household and somebody who's right in that period of pre-retired, maybe forcing them into a younger retired life stage. So when it comes to trusting institutions, you see the same basic pattern with the stock brokerage. It was higher in 2002. It went down all the way through to 2018, but has recovered in 2020. Same thing with a mutual fund company. And the same type of thing we saw before with a financial planning company where it actually went down overall between 20 and 21. Between 18 and 20. And then the levels at a bank. The same pattern of gradually it had been drifting down over 2 decades, but recovering in the last year. Now, one of my hypotheses about this is the first major recession that we've gone through as a country where you can't point to a financial institution or some form of malfeasance as being the cause. It wasn't a dot-com bust, right? It wasn't a real estate issue and CEOs and things like that. This is something that was outside of the financial institution's control. And lo and behold, they actually have benefited in terms of the levels of trust. And this may reflect an opportunity because you can go to them and say, hey, we didn't cause this, but we know how we can help you take advantage of it. Another interesting question has to do with the confidence people have in achieving their major financial goals. And here's something that I think is very interesting. In 2020, these numbers have in fact improved over previous waves. And of course, the higher the amount of assets you have, the higher the proportion who are confident of being able to reach their goals. And this is true whether you're pre-retired. It's also true that it goes up among the younger retired. And of course, it's true among the older retired that they are very confident or extremely confident in achieving their goals. As there may not be much difference between the pre-retired and the younger retired and those in that $100,000 to $250,000 in financial assets. It sort of may reflect the fact that $250,000 and less means that you're in a constrained situation when it comes to what are you going to do with your assets. You have some, but it probably is not going to be enough. And the question, of course, is how do you deploy that? How do you invest that? How do you use that to best leverage what you've got so that you can make sure you have enough money to last and you can live the type of life that you want to live? I did add a couple of slides at the end there having to do with the types of financial planning that different populations are likely to get. And I did not add much to it. I didn't include, for instance, education planning. I did not include insurance planning. But one of the things I think is particularly interesting here is when you look at households in these life stages with these levels of assets, retirement is the highest thing among those who are in the pre-retired life stage. And when you look at those who are in the older life stage, investments is the highest thing when it comes to what they're interested in getting financial planning. The second highest thing across all of these groups tends to be overall comprehensive planning. And I see this being high even among households that have assets, as well as those who may have less in assets, because there is this general sense of there are so many areas of my financial need I have to take into consideration at the same time. I don't have the ability to become an expert in all of these areas, much less one of these areas. If I knew someone I trusted, if I had the type of relationship where I could put together the types of comprehensive plans that help me accomplish my goals, I think it's something that a lot of people would be interested in obtaining. this is the tip of my iceberg. I hope I haven't bored you, but I am going to be here on the rest of the discussion. So any questions that you guys might have on this, please feel free to put them out there. To me, I think we're at something of a tipping point. Like Ken said, we've shifted to where the proportion and the number of households that are in retirement are exceeding those in pre-retirement. And based on life expectancy, this is going to continue for the next decade or two. And they're going to have significant amounts of assets. The question will remain, how will they deploy these assets? How will they prepare and draw down these assets? And what are they going to do in terms of transferring these assets to the next generation? Thank you, Ken. Tim?
Thanks, Larry. Gee, the continuing confidence about one's financial future is puzzling to me, given the uncertainty about life expectancy and spiraling healthcare costs, uncertainty about tax rates, and in the context of the overall social uncertainty of is the pandemic ever going to get over? Are we going to have a surge in inflation? Can these politicians ever learn to work together? And are we all going to be subject to cyber attacks and ransomware? What do you guys think about this?
People are basically optimistic, Ken. I think they tend to expect that good things are going to happen, or that they will somehow just muddle through. Mm-hmm. It's fascinating to me how even in the worst part after 2009, trust went down to very low levels in institutions and intermediaries, and yet their confidence in their own situation went up. I suspect the booming stock market goes a long way to making people think they can pick investments. The danger, of course, is what happens if the market corrects? And I think that's a concern that not many people are really addressing.
How about you guys sitting around the table? What's your perspective?
Well, one of the hats, as we were talking in the beginning, is I'm a planner. I wear the hat of a financial planner. I actually sit knee belly to belly with clients, and part of my responsibilities. And I have a chance to watch clients at that bridge point of going from looking at their investments in their 401k, their IRAs, and their non-qualified assets as down the road assets. And then I have to watch them cross that bridge, and the journey of cross that bridge from these assets had a lot more latitude in play when they were just investments in an account and they were numbers on a statement, to they become now integral in my survival of retirement, and they become such a barrier. And I love the study you brought up, Larry, especially I'm really interested in that statistic of the pre-retirees, 50% of the population or better over 50 that's had that life-changing event. It's a dramatic thing, because I think one of the things that we have as planners that makes things really difficult is sitting in front of the client and assessing what are the situation, what are their motivations to do comprehensive planning right now, what is driving them, what are their fears, what do they think the opportunities lie. And a lot of that will come from the data you just shared, Larry. What's putting them into retirement? Is it a self-decision? Is it a gradual drift into retirement through, this revolving door where they're working or consulting on a more part-time basis? Or is it because they were thrust there prematurely? And once you know the motivation, then it's time to step back. And I can say that the biggest advantage that any advisor has in this arena right now is by starting to look at things holistically. Don't just focus on the retirement income piece. Step back and look at the client's family situations in totality and try to align all those goals. That's where the strength is in the retirement planning world right now, is this holistic view to step back and say, let me assess your whole situation before starting anything. And the clients who don't feel they're getting that service, those are the ones who are going to have a conversation with someone someday, and we have to be ready to answer that call. So, and your data just clearly indicates that's what they're looking for.
Britt, I think you interface both with advisors and clients. How do you see this?
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff brings up a good point, and my role is the Vice President of Insurance and Annuities, but recently I was also the co-director of wealth planning. And so talking to these clients throughout the pandemic, it seems like their primary concerns are around income planning. Even the wealthiest clients can be concerned about income planning, liquidity, mortality, morbidity. I feel like the lack, it's funny, Larry, because, you know, I feel very optimistic after some of your presentation, but when I'm talking to these clients, it seems like the magnitude of lack is there, no matter the size of client. And so really talking to them about how they can protect their wealth, those conversations around holistic planning, leveraging outside resources like Jamie at Producer's Choice, or Connor with his annuity wizard, you know, leveraging these tools so that you can have those comprehensive planning conversations, I feel like is what's driving success with financial professionals or advisors that are talking to clients. So I completely agree. I think the holistic approach is having a lot of success. But, you know, nothing's changed. Mortality is still hovering around 100%, yet everybody's perspective has shifted. And now they're thinking about it. They're thinking about, how is this impacting my family, and how is this impacting my business? And Larry, another, you know, statistic you shared is those people that were on the edge that could retire, and maybe the uncomfortable situation of the last 18 months has pushed them into retirement. I see the same thing with business owners too. You know, whether it's an individual or a business owner, people have been highly uncomfortable, and so they're looking for that trust. They're looking for that confidence. And like I said, I'm very pleased with the slides to know that clients are optimistic about the support that financial professionals can provide, and very clearly the same thing with banks and credit unions. So yeah, that's what I would have to offer there. Thanks for calling me out, Ken. I was nodding a lot.
Do you?
I thought it was sleeping. You know?
Do you find that two things? One thing that I found, and we've added an attitude to ask this, do your clients and the people you talk to start to reflect on their own mortality more now because of the experience of the pandemic, such that things like life insurance, things like long-term care, all forms of protection are gaining in salience and resonating with them more?
I'll jump in again, Larry. Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing that 100%. I don't know about the rest of you, but our insurance, you know, revenue is up 250%. And this is like Larry, I think you said, this is the first time some clients have ever experienced a loss of income. Clients that are typically gainfully employed. And I think that scared them. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for us as financial professionals to leverage these resources, to leverage these key folks, and to start developing a simple, repeatable approach where you can bring this up to your clients, have impactful conversations, differentiate yourself from the broker down the street, and really bring value and comfort to clients that are clearly seeking it.
Yeah, Larry, I would add on to that. While we are seeing a significant increase in like a life insurance and, you know, revenue and business, but I think we would all agree that we still have an opportunity and challenge. While it's increased and the numbers are high, that's also probably because it's starting from kind of a lower starting point, because we're still not doing the business that we could and should be doing if we really step back and asked ourselves, are we doing holistic financial planning? We have, as an industry, been so really focused on the accumulation side and that asset allocation and that advisory planning and supporting our advisors with the tools to be successful in those conversations and helping clients prepare for that retirement. And now it's here. We've got the tsunami of baby boomers that are retiring. I think we did see, Larry, I know your data. I've seen some studies too that even last year, you know, where we had of the baby boomers, I think it was about 2 million had retired, and that you know jumped to 3.2 with the pandemic, right? And so that, whether that's by choice or you know, because they were forced into it or for various reasons. So do we, you know, part of that then is, how are we educating the advisors with having the conversations? Are we giving them the tools to tee that up. And then also with that can be, with webinars and just even kind of courses that I know Jeff and his advanced planning and education group offers, Connor with some of the tools from a technology standpoint, and then also in Producer's Choice with some of the people and that point of sale and those really specific targeted solutions to help with those maybe sometimes very customized types of, whether it's life insurance, long-term care, or even that kind of retirement income through an annuity to help support them as clients are in retirement and going through that decumulation. Most of our insurance conversations, I think right now are about 65% on the legacy planning. Taxation, we all know wherever you sit on the political spectrum, that is a really big focus and topic for clients. It's top of mind. They want to know, and even I think some of the recent research that came out from BlackRock for the millennials and baby boomer or Gen Xers are even concerned about what their retirement income is going to look like. And there's a lot of what we can do as financial professionals to provide them with, some best in class solutions so they can achieve retirement income that provides them with that security, but at levels that they wouldn't otherwise be able to achieve. But a little bit of that's a mind shift, right? And also making sure that we're really supporting our advisors to be prepared with the various resources that they have available to them.
And I'll jump in on that just because tools have been mentioned now a couple times, and I'd say that we kind of go in cycles as a software company where our system gets licensed for a lot of firms that are preparing for things like PTE 2020-02 or Reg BI or Reg 187 or whatever the regulatory item of the quarter or year may be. But we also see these cycles where we start to get licensed more as what was our roots, and that was as a job aid to help somebody very quickly be able to look through all of the annuity products that are available to them and be able to make some very quick recommendations, and then have what's kind of what we're best known for, and that's reason text, explaining in simple, plain to read English why a particular product and rider combination, if it's an income solve, is good for the client based upon their particular facts and circumstances. So that's a tool that we work with back offices to incorporate their best practices and layer on their policies and procedures on that. So the best way to use it as a job aid, something that's going to help the financial professional have a lot of confidence, is to work closely with a home office, somebody like Britt at D.A. Davidson, who they've been longtime users of ours at this point, to really be able to take the expertise that they have and kind of democratize it across the rep base and have somebody who may not be maybe at the top of the annuity knowledge and confidence ladder and help get them to that level so they can have those conversations with clients.
One of the things that I'm seeing, if I could take off of what Jamie and Connor and Britt said, is I'm an instructor in the CFP curriculum. I'm a big fan of comprehensive planning, as you can tell. But what we've seen across the board is many advisors have been really well trained in the AUM, and so that's what they do. And they look at the assets under management, they look at even the retail accounts, they're familiar with the mutual funds, the ETFs, they really are well trained. But we have to look at is advisors, there's a gap in advisor knowledge. And I look at it as two parts. One is education, and the other is being informed. And the differential is education will teach you on the foundational elements of a comprehensive plan and say, all right, you've got a decision to retire. Let's first evaluate what are the cast of characters in your family, who are the decisions going to be made for, then understand the consumption and the tax laws, building on good data. And by looking at the tax return, looking at that, it allows you to compare that against what the client might identify as their cash flow statement. Because where a lot of retirement income is you might just ask a client, hey, how much do you need a month? Oh, we need 4,000, 3,000. There's no great in-depth analysis of that. So there has to be a way to check it and analyze what the client's cash flow needs are. The tax return is a great place to back test their reported need. And then we have to look, and we have to train advisors to recognize risks in retirement that are different from risks during the working years. And I think a lot of advisors have missed that. And I think that's what's causing our confidence numbers to not be as strong. To Brett's point about insurance, I think insurance is increasing because as clients enter into it, the planners that are talking about the risks in retirement, one, premature death in the early years of retirement can be a substantial change in the income plan. If we lose a Social Security check, if we lose or have a pension degradation, we have to take that into consideration. And then there's a long-term care impact. You know, 1 out of 2 people are going to have some sort of long-term care event. I'm just hopeful that when mine happens, my younger wife's going to be there to take care of me because I want good care. And I was fortunate enough to have a daughter who I call my perfect long-term care plan. That was going to be her name when she was born. My wife didn't go for it, but because you know, I know my sons would put me in a nursing home with a hangnail. But we got to have that conversation started with clients. We have to look at the long-term care, and we have to be judicious in how we use the resources. Only after we do that, and we have good data, and we've decided what risk we're going to transfer and retain, can we really do a thorough income plan. And I think that so many advisors try to go straight to the income plan and then back around into the other goals. And as a result, we don't get that client confidence that we should be getting. And so all of it stems back to educate them on the foundations, but then keep our advisors informed as to the current events. There's a lot of things in play. The tax code's in play right now. We know that some of the tax proposals could impact the market. Our clients want to talk about it. So we have to be informed of the current events that are in play. So we have to be educated and informed. And then to the tools that we have to use. I look at Connor and Jamie on this, and you both bring tools that we need. As planners, we need tools. First things first is, yes, having broad access to data is incredible. Having technology tools to help us illustrate and demonstrate our causes there. But we also need, we need coaches that can help us in the planning process behind the scenes. We need resources. As a financial planner, I work with Jamie's company as an advisor that uses Jamie's service. And I know that even though I'm a professor at a university, I plan on an education group that trains advanced planning to broker dealers and RIAs and institutions. In the end, I don't know every great income rider and how it works with an annuity, nor do I have the best insurance knowledge on a situation. And I also know I don't want to dial an 800 number and talk to some random person. I need to have somebody that understands my planning approaches. If I was a coach looking for a coach to say, okay, I've got this client circumstance. What do we got? And I need that person, a human being, to say, all right, Jeff, I work with you enough on cases to say, I know what you favor in planning techniques and tools, and I know what you don't. So let me talk about the ones that are there and already understand my knowledge at the tools, so to help me align my clients' needs with where I want to go efficiently. Because many advisors dread doing comprehensive planning for one major reason. It's a lot of work. It takes a ton of time and a ton of expertise. So the more people we can have in our back pocket to help us do that work, it makes it easy. So I think that's where we're seeing some of the barriers in planning is we got to make sure that people are educated and informed, and they have a toolbox of tech and support people to coach them through the process so that they can be frontline with their clients and deliver the service. I don't mean to ramble, but it's kind of listening to all the cool ideas you're saying that I want to build on.
But the bottom line though is when you look at banks and credit unions, you know, the typical advisor maybe works on one plan a month, maybe 2 plans a month, you know, and that advisor has 450 clients. So that means they're hitting 2% of their clients with planning a year, right? So that's kind of discouraging. And I think there's a real context here that is helpful for our advisors to understand. And Larry, and some other research you've shown us in other settings, there's been a long run trend of moving away from seeking professional financial advice. You might speak to that.
Yes, it's absolutely true. And in fact, it's interesting that looking at that likelihood to obtain different types of financial planning and advice, that number for many of the population is actually down from 2018. That in spite of all the uncertainty with the pandemic, employment situation, longevity, and one's own mortality, the proportion, the number of people in each of those segments tend to be less likely to go out there and look for advice. Whereas, and this is the encouraging sign, the proportion of people in 2020 who said they had recently got advice actually went up significantly across a lot of those populations. It's almost like whether they were anticipating or not, they went out and got that advice. And now they don't feel the need to get more advice. But that's only until the market stays in its current state. If it changes, you're going to see a lot of them have to rejigger everything. I mean, there is not much room for latitude to make changes. If you're in that $100,000 to $250,000 of assets and you're in a situation where something happens, you don't have a lot of flexibility, and especially if you're only in the younger retired group. So that interest in getting more advice, unfortunately, when the market goes up, people think they know what they're doing. What was that old line? Mistaking brains for an up market? I think that's kind of where we are. And of course, when the market goes down, they're not going to think it was themselves. They're going to blame their advisor, hopefully their investment advisor. But the point is, you can insulate yourself from that. The more you can get people thinking about it as being an integrated situation between all of these needs and allocating resources based on current priorities and future needs.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and Peter, I asked, as Tim knows, a few years ago, we invented this concept of the retirement investor, and we picked $100,000 as a threshold because 3 or 4 years ago, most banks were saying, well, that's our target market, anyone with $100,000 and above. But as you also know, in the last year or so, we've seen a lot of major banks move to 250, right? And we're wondering, what about this slice of the population that's between 100 and 250? And, you know, and it's, I think one thing that Larry's research he showed us earlier is that these guys really needed financial advice.
Yeah.
Maybe more so than the older ones, the wealthier ones.
Yeah. And I think, to what Larry was saying, it's incumbent upon us to change that definition of advice. And in the past, I think advice to many clients was investment choices. And Larry says that's gone down as far as what clients are looking for. Well, I believe it, because you can get investment choices anywhere and everywhere online from many different sources for next to nothing. So if clients view investment choices as advice, I see why it's going down. But if it's up to us to change what advice means, and if advice means that comprehensive plan that Larry was mentioning, or those other different components of advice, well, those aren't as easy to just get anywhere and everywhere. An advisor delivering those can add value. So I think that's part of what we're seeing is a movement away from utilizing advice in some cases until we change what advice means. And then I think we can get that back.
I agree with you, Peter. I think it is, reframing what we mean when we talk about planning and advice, because right, let's take long-term care. 80% of clients want to talk about and want their advisor to discuss long-term care and solutions, and only 10% are having the conversation. And it's similar stats when we think about life insurance. Many are concerned that they are going to outlive their retirement assets. And, so talking about that income needs and where can they get the most income from, it is likely going to be something that we're talking about, or on the protective planning side through leveraging annuities or insurance to help support that. But, so Larry, your comments of, but they feel good about the advice that they've received, but how does that really parlay into this comprehensive, holistic, where we've talked about the other side of their balance sheet? We've a sell for healthcare. Why should they self-fund it if they can leverage solutions with different long-term care products? Are we having those types of conversations? Are advisors prepared and to tee up those discussions? And then have we provided them with the support and the expertise, Larry? Because your comment, I think on the overall kind of comprehensive financial planning is that, they don't have time to be experts in everything, and I don't think we can expect that. And so you've got to bring them where they are that quarterback, and they've got a network of people that are an extension of their team to come in to be that insurance expert planner and consultant, or long-term care or retirement income, and fulfill that as part of the redefinition of what we mean by planning and advice.
Yeah. So
I
Go ahead,
agree,
Rick, go
Jamie.
ahead.
I think that's the model for success that we're seeing, is that the FP or the advisor is the quarterback, and then they're bringing in specialists that specialize in each area. And somebody asked a question through the chat feature. Do you think that these solutions, these risk management solutions like insurance, are up because clients are bringing it up, or is it because of the financial professionals? Gosh, I wish it was because of the financial professionals. But really, honestly, it's because of that client's, I believe, their own experience over the last 18 months. And it's really them that's bringing it up. That being said, we are definitely coaching our financial professionals. And I think the adoption is increasing naturally because they're noticing that this is a concern for clients. And those that are our best financial professionals, they prioritize, like Jeff says, they prioritize client concerns. So even if you have a very wealthy client, if they want a long-term care solution, I'm coaching our financial professionals to position that. Yes, you've done lots of Monte Carlo scenarios, and yes, their plan is great, even without the long-term care solution, but your client is asking for this. And whether you satisfy this solution or they walk down the street and some other broker creates the first wedge to your best client, I would recommend you consider leveraging these resources that we're handing over to you with point of sale experts, as well as these resources like the Annuity Wizard, which can even search for annuities with enhanced long-term care benefits. You should really be leveraging these solutions. If you're truly wanting to grow and build your practice and ride this wave that Larry has shown us, which I'm still excited about, Larry, then I think you need to start looking at what other people are doing to drive success. It's a very clear picture, and Jamie just described it. You're the quarterback.
I've always been skeptical of the old adage of insurance is sold, not bought, particularly when you look at in a financial advisor setting as opposed to a life insurance agent, which is all they can do is sell life insurance. So naturally they're selling it. In a lot of my experience, insurance is bought, and the person who gets the sale happens to be the person who runs into the customer at the time when they want to buy.
Yep. And the last thing I'll say, because I feel like I'm taking up too much time, but I think an education-based approach to all of this around risk management is the way to reach success. If it's about sales or if it's revenue, it won't work. It has to be about educating the client, helping them to make an informed decision that's in alignment with that financial professional as well.
Yeah, Jeff, I've heard you say that the advisor needs to be the educator in chief. Right?
Yep. And yes, thank you, Ken. We had a chance to talk about that. Is I believe that every advisor needs to first be educated themselves, and second thing, they need to educate their clients, and third, they need to ask questions. I think what happens is we just don't ask the clients, because I can say from practical experience, here's a sad thing. We've got Reg BI that comes out. Reg BI says you got to know your client. It says, all right, here we go. Let's learn about our clients. But let's be real. Do you know when most advisors learn a lot about their client? After they made the sale and they're filling out the BD paperwork. Oh, it's time to learn about my clients. And all of a sudden you discover things that really matter to them. If we as advisors follow a very prescribed method to gather data, and we do it in a very disciplined manner, one, it's scalable. Two, we have a well-documented file. And three, through the course of asking questions, and while we're asking questions, we pause for a moment and we do what we have as an island of education, where we ask permission of our clients to explain a topic. For example, we talked a little about long-term care and the importance of that and the insurance and the risk management. One of the questions is, what is your long-term care strategy? Mr. and Mrs. Jones, what is your long-term care strategy? And the next question is you get them to pause. And then even a simple question, how much do you know about how we can transfer that risk of a long-term care event outside your portfolio? How much are you aware of the things? What I'd ask your permission, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, is to take a couple minutes of your time at some point and explain your options so that you can make an informed decision to either retain the risk, in which case I'll design your portfolio and I'll adjust it as you age and approach the probability of risk increase, or we'll transfer that risk and you'll get me a little more freedom in portfolio design that's not so age dependent. And there's not a client in the world that will say, no, I don't want to have that conversation. But we have to ask the client's permission to educate them what their options are. But it goes back to, we have to be the educator in chief. Ken, you're exactly right. We've got to be that quarterback. And we've got to ask good questions, and we've got to have a command of each category so we can at least explain conceptually the concepts. Even if we're going to bring that expert in to help us down the road, we need to be able to broadly explain the concepts. We need to be able to explain the key estate planning documents. We need to explain what are the elements of a tax return that could impact you in retirement, and what are some of the planning techniques we should look for. For example, what's it going to look like on your income plan if one spouse dies early and you're on a compressed tax bracket with a single deduction as a single taxpayer? That's a consequential. We have to be able to explain that to clients. So we have to be that educator in chief. We have to know our stuff so that we can do our job. And it's when we know our stuff is when we earn the clients away from our competitors.
So Jeff, those are good points. And Jeff, in the panel, let me ask you this, is that, do you all think it's time for us to reevaluate the skill sets needed to be a successful advisor today compared to what those skill sets were 5, 10, 20 years ago?
Absolutely. The world of today, 20 years ago, I started practicing. 20 years ago, most of my clients had pensions. 20 years ago, they had Social Security benefits. And many times the transition from the cash flow needed pre-retirement was almost invisible in change when they went to retirement, but the pension and Social Security benefits equated to their pre-retirement income. And so the pressure on the investment assets was de minimis in most circumstances. Today, in the absence of defined benefit plans, we have to recreate a pension using the tools that are available. We have to change our skill set from what we were 20 years ago. If you asked me 15 years ago, were you using an annuity, an income rider? My answer was no. My clients all have pensions, Social Security. We're investing the money for emergencies, enjoyment, and legacy. Today, we're investing that money to live on. And we've got to be very intelligent. We need new skill sets. And because we're stretching it for a longer time, we're stressing less money over a longer period of time to cover greater needs. We've got to be more considerate of transferring risks that are transferable. We have to learn new skills, Peter. You're absolutely right. We've got to change who we were to who we need to be tomorrow. Wayne Gretzky, where's the puck going?
A couple of points that were stimulated by what you said, Jeff and Britt. There are a couple of changes that are very different from 10 years ago in terms of households entering into retirement with significant levels of debt. This has raised a concept that we've begun to investigate, what we're calling the degree to which a person is intergenerational in their thinking. Because debt can be intergenerational, assets can be intergenerational. And a household who is not thinking that way would make one decision in terms of what their priorities are and where they would invest and what they would protect. But more and more, and partially in a reaction to the pandemic, where people had to take back in people who hadn't lived in the household in years, or take over responsibility for an aged parent, we're seeing an increase in this intergenerationality. And to your point, Peter, it requires learning a whole new skill set in terms of gathering the information about the responsibilities and crafting a plan that will help to adequately meet those needs.
If I could, on that same concept, Larry, you're absolutely right. And the intergenerational thing also goes into the diversity of our population. There are many cultures that demand that parents take care of kids, kids take care of parents. And it's not a voluntary obligation. It's an obligation based on the culture. And so we have to be more respectful that we are a really multicultural nation. And as the cultures continue to become more diverse, we have to be respectful of that. And that obligation carries down. One of the things, if I could, I feel like I'm hogging this, and you guys can shut me up, turn my mic off, Tim, if I'm going too far. One of the things on a Saturday morning in the early part of the pandemic, I got into a discussion with a colleague of mine, a business partner, about how do we measure clients' motivations. And one of the things that came up is we always categorize our clients. And the discussion is, what's a moderate wealth client? What's a 100K, 250? And I would say that there's another axis that we could add to that measure, and that is measure the clients against themselves. And the way I would look at measuring the clients, and Peter, your comment earlier kind of led to it, who we were and who we are, is if we were to categorize the clients into 4 categories and say, all right, what does it mean to be 4 categories? And let's measure them against themselves. And the way we measure against themselves is what are the resources versus the lifestyle, cost of lifestyle. Category 1, to your point, Larry, is clients that are living beyond their means. Their lifestyle exceeds their resources, either now or in the foreseeable years of retirement. In which case, our role as a financial planner is to help to bring those into alignment so the debt doesn't mount and that it's managed through the course of retirement. So the goal of category 1 is to address people, because it doesn't matter if you make $1 million a year, if you spend 1.2, you're still category 1. If you make 20,000 a year, you're spending 30, you're still category 1. If your resources do not equate to your lifestyle, you have a problem. And other people are going to have to care for you, or you will eventually cascade down and be thrust back in the working years. Category 2 starts where resources and lifestyle are at parity. And that says that our clients are doing okay, but they really, if we stress test it with a long-term care event, they would fall backwards. They would revert back to category 1. Category 3 starts off with where a client has more resources or the ability to produce income with the assets than their lifestyle is. And in that category, they have the ability to help those that they love, to your point, Larry, those that they love, or the charities and causes they believe in. And so the motivation, for example, let's talk about long-term care. The motivation for category 2 is, if you want to survive with a stress test, you better consider having some coverage in place, because an event would nuke you. Category 3, it's about preserving that status and being able to help those that you love and leverage up. So the motivation changes. And then category 4 actually starts at the point the transfer tax kicks in. That is, you got plenty of resources against your lifestyle. And now the only barrier we have is the potential tax exposure when you go to transfer that legacy. So instead of measuring clients by dollar amounts or assets, the financial planning, let's measure them against their own lifestyle. And if we measure them against their lifestyle, now we can understand their motives and we can understand our planning goals and objectives. This is the behavioral science that we have to take into consideration. So Peter, to your point, 20 years ago, we didn't have to think about that. Today, behavioral investing and behavioral planning go hand in hand. Behavioral investing is don't leave when the market's at the bottom and wait for it to recover and buy at the high point. That's behavioral investing. Behavioral planning is getting clients to be in alignment and understanding where they rate against themselves. Sorry, again, Tim, shut my mic off if you need to.
Good points, really good points.
I spent too much time thinking. I make a sports analogy about Wayne Gretzky, but earlier today I said, yeah, he's on the court. I mean,
Do we have any questions coming in over the line, Tim?
No, I think the board is clear now. Britt mentioned one that had come in earlier, but yeah, we're all square with our audience right now.
I have one here. It's from Richard Feder from Fort Lee Savings. Richard writes, "This all seems like a heavy lift. My advisors get paid for repositioning their clients' assets and monitoring their advisory accounts. But as their clients spend down their assets, how will my advisors make a living?" Peter, you want to try to handle that one?
Sure. Well, it does pose a big challenge in that, overall in the industry, we charge for product sales, we charge for assets, but the value is advice. And this is regardless of retirement. That's in total how we're positioned today and always have been. But when you look at retirement planning to this topic, I think it's even amplified there, because here is where, in retirement, is where advisors likely need to provide even more advice to their clients. So if that statement is true anytime, it's more important now as clients are in retirement. So, so that's a challenge that right now the industry has, I don't want to say ignored, but has not solved. We're paying on commission, we're paying on assets under management. We've even recommended firms pay some advisors on the new assets that they bring in or net assets that they bring in. But, none of those really speak to what we're talking about today, which is that client's need. So, one solution that some firms are doing, especially outside of the bank and credit union firms, are charging for financial plans. And, financial plans probably better mirror the payment that equals the type of advice that you're giving. Because product, you help somebody with their distributions from their 401k, from their IRA, from their retail investment account. You help a client with those. Well, there's no real revenue in that, but there's a lot of value in it. But those two don't match up today. And I think that's what, so that's the genesis of that question. If there were fees for planning, then those fees could probably better match up with the advice and the planning needs that clients have, especially, in these retirement and in these distribution years.
Yeah, Peter, in the green room before you joined us, Jeff was telling us about his experience when his partner finally talked him into charging for planning. Jeff?
Tim, the gentleman who asked the original question, Tim, about my advisors get paid for this. Is that the name, Tim? Did I get it right, Ken? The original, this.
I think it was Rick.
Richard, I'm sorry. What's my middle name? So I should have known that one. Sorry.
Richard.
All right, good name. Let me, if I could share, there's an incredible missed opportunity from advisors that are not charging planning fees. And I will tell you from firsthand experience, and then we were talking about this in the green room, is 20 years practice, I didn't charge a planning fee because my competitors weren't charging a planning fee. My business partner, Ruth, who's a CPA by trade, said, you're missing out on those planning fees. You're missing out. And the nice thing is, as the AUM portfolio does drop and the fees do drop as the client spends it down, and they will, the planning fees stay level and keep coming in. You mentioned there's 400, let's say there's 400 clients that a person services. If they were to charge a $9.95 planning fee to half of those clients, what did we just put on the table?
Mm-hmm.
How much revenue it's far more than you'll make even on the AUM, and it really compensates you for what you're doing. That's, Peter, to your point, advice. And so the question is, oh my gosh, how do I ask my client to pay me for something that I've never asked them for before? And how do I do it and not worry about losing the client? If I could offer one suggestion, one nugget of experience, and this is just practical. This was me asking for a planning fee was like being a kid going to kindergarten for the first day. I was terrified. So I offer the client the option of free or fee. And I described it this way. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, as I'm going to work with you, I'm going to do my due diligence to help you select the right investment and insurance vehicles. I'm going to look at your tax situation. I'm going to look at your estate planning goals. I'm going to make sure they're all in alignment with my recommendations as part of my due diligence. While I'm doing it, I'm going to, quote unquote, do it on a yellow pad. And I will take the liberty of using a financial calculator, this time value of money, where I'm just going to key in some basic information to make sure that my recommendations are in line with your goals. Now, the problem with that is it's very linear and it doesn't take into consideration the sequence of returns or some of the other risks that could happen if I were to use a software tool or a technology-based tool that would allow me to do a Monte Carlo analysis and give you a better probability of success and adapt you around your needs. I can do that. I have the tools available, but it takes time. If I'm going to do that for you, it's going to take another couple, 3 hours. So, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, if you'd like me to do it, it's going to be a $2,500 fee. And through the course of it, to keep it updated, it's an additional $500 every year. And I offered the clients free or fee. They said yes instantly. It scared me because I should have asked for more money. And then I asked every subsequent client that our firm is on board at since. Every single one of them said fee. No pullback, no pushback for a second, because they wanted good data. They wanted to be able to know there's something behind it besides my opinion that this is going to work. And having that output made a lot of difference. In addition to that, when it got to the recommendation phase, the byproduct was I stopped receiving the miscellaneous objections that they would give if I was doing the planning for free, because they were always skeptical. As a matter of fact, the recommendations were widely accepted because it was the advice they paid for. And then the other byproduct of that was we noticed a substantial increase in referrals that were not asked for, because the clients would go back to their social circles and tell their social circles, no, I don't get it free, I pay for it because I want it to be real. And the depth was there. So when I look back to Richard's question is, where's the money coming from? It's already there. It's in your institution. It's at the desk in your offices. It's sitting there and people are very willing to pay. In almost every study, and you guys might have data, people are willing to pay for this advice. And all you have to do is simply ask for it. And even if you offer the client fee or free, because you're afraid to ask, you'll find that clients will say, fee, please. It's there.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff, I interjected, but I heard you say that through that process, it sounds like you're getting an agreement with the client. Like, I'm agreeing as a client to this plan, and now it's their plan versus your plan. So they're probably more likely behaviorally to follow it anyway, right?
Mhm.
And so just, from a coaching perspective, I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I think I would add, I echo Jeff's, and part of that is right. They've invested in it. They've invested in it financially, to pay for it. And so it has, it's got an additional value. And I think we have definitely, we've not been charging the fees that we should to be on planning. But my other kind of comment and feedback where I think we've missed the boat in terms of looking at, okay, it does seem like a big lift. And for a client base that where we look to see that their assets are dwindling, but let's not also forget that we've got the multi-generational aspect, and we're still not seeing the legacy of those assets, staying with the advisor when one of the spouses dies, and then going to the children. But those that are getting the commitment throughout that legacy planning are the advisors that are providing that holistic wealth management and are doing the type of planning that Jeff just talked about. And I think we've got a lot of risk to the assets, and maybe those that are in that 250 and up, because those are the clients that we expect to have residual assets when they do pass on in terms of that legacy. The other aspect too, though, I think because you can look at maximizing someone's portfolio with taking part of it and leveraging the income that you can get, so you can still preserve and grow the remaining assets that are left to provide clients with the income that they need through something like an annuity. And we're not seeing that in the actual rate. What we see as an industry of the types of products that our clients are investing in to really realize and optimize the income that they can get out of a portion of their portfolio, while they might then still be able to have the remain invested, where that can have some growth and conservative growth that advisors can still be compensated on. So I think it's important to think about the totality, but certainly looking at what we're doing in terms of financial planning and the charges associated with that, is a missed opportunity for all of us.
Yeah, it would seem, go ahead, Larry.
I was just going to say that the holistic approach that takes into account not just the assets, the debt, the protections, the long-term care, and the intergenerationality actually go hand in hand. And to effectively be able to set up a plan that takes into account the potential for the assets to be intergenerational or deployed intergenerationally, not necessarily at the point of death, but during the transition phase, provides an opportunity to basically retain them within the organization and create an ongoing annuity, if you will, in terms of the relationship with the family. And I think that that's a real opportunity, because most people, again, aren't going to want to go out there and deal with 5 different types of relationships and then have to deal with what's going to happen when I die or what's going to happen for my children. There is a unique opportunity here. And I will acknowledge that initially it's going to be the wealthier populations for whom it makes sense. But I also think that this basic concern is also true in that 100 to 250,000 asset group, because one of the attitudes we measure is this sense of, I'm going to strive to live on just the income that's produced and not draw down my principal. We've asked this over a number of years, and you'll be amazed that almost there is some relationship with wealth, but generally speaking, lots of individuals are trying to restructure their life so they can live within the envelope. And older households tend to be much more conservative. So all of these things work together. And if you could put this together in a holistic plan and train your advisors to do it, I think it's a win-win.
Would you guys like to see how I show clients a holistic plan, at least aesthetically, the introduction, the first meeting?
Why not? Go ahead.
I'm going to share my screen just for a second. I'll show you the virtual stuff just to show you, because one of the things here that is, can you see a screen? My screen is should have a,
Yep.
Okay. Is as I explain to clients, of course, new meetings, I introduce my background requirements to meet the requirements of Reg BI and all that. But then I go through, and once you explain to a client that you have five distinct plans that are all running in your life, no matter how well thought out or how loosey-goosey they are, all 5 plans generally operate in a vacuum. It is the connection of those 5 plans so that every decision you make will take into consideration the consequences in the other 4 plans. So if you make a decision to retain a risk for long-term care, it'll impact your investment plan because you have to become more conservative as you age. So you have liquidity. So you have to recognize where you're doing this. And so, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, we have a very prescribed formula for doing it. To start with, we're actually, and this is where Larry, this is right up what you just said. We're going to get to know your estate plan because you have 3. You have an estate plan when the first spouse dies and the surviving spouse needs to live on those assets, and any constraints or restrictions that surviving spouse may have. Maybe it's a late in life marriage, maybe it's Brady Bunch. And so what constraints do we have? We have an estate plan when the second spouse dies and we need to pass these assets down to the kids. How and when are they going to be there? And then we have another estate plan is what are your documents in place to handle the qualified assets, to handle be the power of attorney, to avoid guardianships, conservatorships. Then we have a tax plan. But the nice thing is with the estate plan, we really work on gamma. And gamma is the measure, the value of comprehensive financial planning brings to a family's net worth. It's not measured in alpha like we measure a portfolio. Gamma is the totality of financial planning. And there's a Deloitte study on this. There's a Morningstar study. There's a Vanguard study. There's numerous studies on that topic. But the thing is, when you look at all the different studies, you also look at what matters with clients. What matters with clients is not rate of return. It's how well do you know me and how well do you get my needs. And when you talk about estate planning first and you get to know the cast of characters in their family to see what they've done and how things are in alignment, what their legacy goals are, you learn what motivates your decision. And then if we get to tax plans, we look at saying, how do we mitigate taxes? That one of the largest costs in retirement while both are alive. How do we plan for that surviving spouse's single person tax bracket? And how do we anticipate the multi-generational element? So Larry, this is spot on. That's why I wanted to bring this up because you really teed me up. I couldn't have asked for a better tee up. Is how do we deal with that multi-generational? Because now we tie the kids to the plan. And then the insurance plan that we face in retirement, because when we do the tax plan, we see consumption of income. We know how much money came in. We know we can ask how much they spent. And we look and say, was there a savings or was there a loss that year? And now we can look and say, what would the consequence of a premature death, especially during retirement, be if a person died the day after they signed their walkaway papers? What about long-term care? What about disability? And now when we know all that data, we can use that data to build an income plan and use the appropriate income tools that allow the greatest leverage. Because all too often, if we look straight at AUM with the low yields on bonds and the historic rate on the market since 2000 to 2020, when you look at the S&P, it's 5.5%. So these lower rates have changed our withdrawal rate. So now we have income tools that have popped up from the insurance companies, especially, that we can use tools. We can segregate less money, leverage it to produce more income, which then will allow us to do the investment plan. And so by being able to explain this to a client and then walk them through a structured situation, we can say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, I'm going to step in the middle with you to help you do it. Now that took 3 minutes to explain, but the whole thing here is the more that we can explain to clients what is planning and how can we do it, and then we gather data for a fee, we now fix the revenue problem that Richard talked about, which is legitimate, but we're really delivering that service to clients, and we're developing a framework to the clients on how are we going to do this and how can we do this in bite size. And it doesn't have to take 20 hours to do a plan. It doesn't have to be that long. It just has to be explained to the clients that this is what we'll do. This is how we'll do it. And this is why we're doing it. And so anyway, Larry, to your point, it is multi-generational. And if you catch in that multi-generational nerve, you win the hearts and souls of your clients because you actually show that you care. It's not about rate of return. These are real people. These are our parents. These are, in some cases, our grandparents. These are our family members. We have to show them the same extent we want to show our parents.
It also seems that in terms of client engagement, to be able to, as you're explaining your recommendations to your client, to be able to say, and we've reached out to this insurance specialist to help us with this choice, right? To find these choices for you, or we've used this tool to be able to choose which annuity product to show you. I just didn't do it because I like the name of the product. You know, I've gone through this process, or that, you know, I only choose products that have the names of former presidents or signers of the Declaration of Independence or something. I have a process for figuring this out. I think that really builds confidence in you and engagement.
Yeah, and I would tack onto that, Ken, that, you know, the last person who asked a question, I think they used the word overwhelmed, you know, shifting over to holistic planning. And so I believe that developing that simple approach, chopping down one tree at a time, and maybe incorporating just a simple fact finder to ask all those same questions that Jeff covered in his slides and his presentation. So even if all you did was start with a fact finder that asks all those questions, and then you prioritize your client's concerns around that, that's the beginning of holistic planning. And so it's just developing that simple approach, and, you know, even having other people in your firm share what they're doing, asking for their fact finders.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I think, Larry, one indication of how deep interest is in working and understanding your financial situation through a comprehensive plan is your experience with the Macromonitor survey. I mean, how many questions would you estimate are in this survey?
Let's just say that we end up with over 4,000 variables. The questionnaire takes about 2 hours or longer to fill out. And here's the interesting thing. Between 2018 and 2020, our completion rate went up. The number of people we invited and the number of completes we got more completes than before. And the questionnaire was actually longer in 2020. Once you legitimize what it is that you're doing, you let the respondent know that this is not an attempt to sell anything. And you explain to them that this will help them not only to understand their own situation better, but helps other people who are in similar situations. Most of our respondents are very forthcoming in terms of the information of their own personal situation. And we ask all of the information about every asset they have, every debt they have, all forms of group and individual insurance, all forms of retirement plans, DB plans, use of advisors, et cetera. It's a very thorough, comprehensive questionnaire, and yet we're getting a higher response rate than we did before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is a survey that they've been conducting since '78, I believe. 1978
was the first wave. Yeah.
Every other year, over 4,000 households of every wave, and a more for your benefit, an oversample of more affluent households. Right. So that you reweighted back to the national population. So you're actually able to have millionaires.
We in fact have a large enough sample of households who have over 5 million that it's statistically reliable.
Mm-hmm. So and you can see, you know, why we love the use of data. So
thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we reach the witching hour here?
Well, I guess maybe I would just kind of leave or comment from kind of a wrap up, because I do, think we had a lot of great conversation and threw a lot out there on I think the opportunity and the need and the challenge that we have. And I think also what's important to take away, because, we see certainly a lot of the commoditization of our business and the compression on fees. And so, so if the assets are also going down as clients are spending it, and we're spending more time, and we're talking about a lot of complex planning, how are we going to do all that, still be profitable and see and grow, right, our programs and our books of business and our advisors? And I think we've talked about a number of things, certainly on the multi-generational, that where I think that makes a big impact. But I would also just kind of add, I think that part of it and for you on the line is, how to, on the education, what are the tools, what are the people, how can you bring in so that you don't have that heavy lift for your advisors in your financial institution, your programs, with some of the technology and the point of sale support that is out there, that between whether it's Capital Rock or Producer's Choice and other great resources that are available. So I think just really kind of keeping that in mind and perspective as you think about that planning, because there is a big opportunity, and there's a lot of revenue tied to it too, right? I mean, when I think about some of the we had our largest insurance case last year for a financial advisor, where one transaction, they did $2.5 million in commission on one transaction. So I know we're kind of talking about a lot of that mass, affluent, but these are customers and members of your financial institutions that do have significant wealth, and it can be very significant in terms of the growth. And when you for your program to integrate a lot of the protective planning strategies that we've talked about. So, but I think we really do need to be preparing our teams for success, for kind of that decumulation phase, because there's a huge opportunity for us as an industry.
Mm-hmm.
If I could chime in on Jamie's thing real quick, I'm still thinking about what Richard said. My people are dealing with declining AUM, and how are they going to, generate the revenue? And I think that if we teach our advisors, we teach ourselves as planners to ask the right questions, to Britt's point, and it's asking the right questions and teeing up the right concepts. There's an incredible amount of revenue that most people are licensed to earn by solving client needs if they would just ask, what is your long-term care plan going to be? What tools are we using for income that are going to provide you that guaranteed income? What's there? And in order to make it possible, we need to teach our advisors how to ask those questions, how to educate their clients. And then we need to have our team players behind the scenes to support us. If, a lot of times people say, I don't want to ask a question about hybrid life or long-term care because I don't even know where to go. It's a lot of work to look up and call 6 different insurance companies. You got to be able to call that coach and say, hey, what are my options for a 70-year-old who's got diabetes type 2? And what's my most cost-effective option? And it's that revenue, Richard, that's sitting on the table. And to the point that less than 20% of the people are probably using those tools, but 80% of the people want to talk about it. That's all that money that's just being left on the table. And some insurance agent who happens to be, Kenny said it, in the right place at the right time, who asked the question, will help that client acquire it. Why should it not be the person that handles their assets?
Mm-hmm.
Why should it not be that person? So we just got to train them to understand it. We need to give them the resources to do the research. We need to have those coaches like Jamie's team to bring in and be there so that you can make a quick call. And that call always occurs the day you got the appointment. Because Britt, young client facing, you know how that works. They're coming at 2. Jake, get me a result now. It's 11 a.m. I'll see you after lunch. And that's how we do it, because we're all procrastinators. But it's having the tools and asking the right questions, and all that money's sitting on the table. And it's incredible amounts of money.
Tim, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I want to take a moment to once again thank the sponsors of today's event. Thanks to Producer's Choice Network and to Capital Rock. We couldn't hold things like this without your support. I'd like to thank everybody who joined us on our panel today: Jamie, Britt, Larry, Connor, Jeff, and thanks to all of you in the audience for tuning in today. I hope that you'll consider joining us at a future event. Our next virtual dialogue is taking place next month in July. It's going to focus on the intersection of technology and insurance, excuse me.
And you'll have a chance to hear more from Steve in July.
That's right.
Mhm.
You can. And looking towards the fall, we continue to feel optimistic that we're going to be able to resume our normal schedule of in-person study groups. I've got the topics and the dates here, and there's more information on our website about all of those. Thanks again, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.